I was a counselor at Camp Cedar Hollow in the summer of '97, the last summer it ever opened. People think the camp closed because of a wildfire, but I know the truth. I saw the witches, and I saw what they took.
Have you ever heard the saying, "Every camp has its ghost stories"? At Camp Cedar Hollow, it wasn't just ghost stories. They spoke of witches, 3 sisters to be exact. Their names were long forgotten, but their legend lived on in whispers passed around the crackling campfires. The summer of 1997 was the hottest anyone could remember. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and the forest surrounding the camp seemed more alive than usual. Branches creaked without wind, and shadows stretched long past sunset. The counselors dismissed it as harmless folklore, but the kids couldn't help but feel like the woods were watching. Among the campers that year was a girl named Jenna. Quiet and reserved, she was more interested in sketching the trees and the lake than in canoe races or campfire songs. But she wasn't alone. Her 2 bunkmates, Kelly and Marissa, took an immediate interest in her.
You've heard the story, right?
Kelly asked one humid night, pulling her flashlight close. Its dim yellow beam made her face look skeletal. Jenna shook her head. Marissa smirked.
They say 3 sisters were killed here, accused of witchcraft, burned alive in the woods. But not before they cursed the land. They swore they'd come back one day and take someone with them.
Kelly leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper.
They say you can summon them, but only if you're brave enough.
Jenna rolled her eyes.
Let me guess. You say their names in a mirror or something?
Marissa shook her head.
No, you leave something in the woods. Something important. Then you wait.
Jenna dismissed it as another campfire story. But the next day, she noticed something strange. On the edge of the woods, near the boundary where campers weren't allowed to go, there was a small pile of objects. A charm bracelet, a folded note, a baseball cap. They looked deliberately placed, almost like offerings. That night, curiosity got the better of her. While the other girls were asleep, Jenna slipped out of the cabin and made her way toward the woods. The air was stifling, and the usual symphony of crickets and frogs had gone silent. She stood at the edge, clutching her sketchbook tightly. It was the most important thing she owned, filled with drawings of places she'd been and places she dreamed of going. Without really understanding why, she knelt and placed it on the ground beside the other offerings.
Let's see if you're real,
she muttered, her voice barely audible. The woods seemed to exhale. A cool breeze swept through the clearing, carrying the faint scent of burning wood. The trees creaked, their shadows shifting unnaturally. Jenna turned to leave, but something caught her eye. A figure stood deeper in the woods, just barely visible in the moonlight. It was a woman, tall and gaunt, her hair hanging in stringy black curtains around her face. Jenna's breath caught. Another figure appeared beside the first, then a third. They stood perfectly still, watching her. "Jenna," one of them whispered, her voice carrying through the stillness like a blade slicing the air. Jenna ran. The next morning, she tried to convince herself it was a dream, but when she went to retrieve her sketchbook, it was gone. In its place was something far worse, a single piece of paper torn from its pages, with a drawing she hadn't made. It was her, standing in the woods, surrounded by 3 women with hollow eyes and stretched, grimacing smiles. Over the next few days, Jenna became withdrawn, refusing to join in camp activities. Kelly and Marissa teased her about it until she finally snapped.
I saw them. The witches. They're real and they're watching me.
That night, Kelly and Marissa decided to prove her wrong. They dragged Jenna back to the edge of the woods, carrying a flashlight and a backpack full of junk to leave as offerings.
See?
Kelly said, tossing a plastic bracelet onto the pile.
Nothing's happening.
The wind picked up. Jenna begged them to leave, but Marissa laughed, pulling a necklace from her pocket.
I found this in your bag.
It was Jenna's grandmother's locket, the only thing she had left of her.
No.
Jenna cried, lunging forward. But Marissa threw it onto the pile. The woods erupted in noise, branches snapping, leaves rustling violently. The flashlight flickered and died. The last thing Jenna saw before the darkness swallowed them was the three sisters stepping out from the trees, their hands outstretched and their faces twisted in glee. The next morning, counselors found the pile of offerings untouched, save for Jenna's sketchbook, resting neatly on top. Inside was one final drawing, the empty clearing, and three figures disappearing into the woods. Jenna, Kelly, and Marissa were never seen again. To this day, Camp Cedar Hollow remains abandoned. Locals say the woods are cursed. They claim you can still hear the witches whispering if you get too close. And if you're foolish enough to leave something behind, you might never leave at all.